Tulsa did not happen in a vacuum. There's a direct connective thread from East St. Louis through DC and Omaha, Nebraska, and Elaine, Arkansas, all the way to Tulsa. The patterns of the white mob attacking Black people is the same in each of these communities. Many of the factors are the same: economic envy, the fallacy of white supremacy, the accusations that a white woman was accosted by a Black man. There are patterns in each of these massacres. The patterns set the stage for the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921.
Two years before the 1921 Race Massacre, Tulsa was the site of a convention for the sons of the Confederate veterans. And those veterans were treated like rock stars. When these veterans came into town, they drove through Greenwood. And it's said that those veterans rebuked the white males of that day for allowing the Black population to be so successful.
There's a lot of jealousy associated with Black accomplishment. There's a lot of envy associated with Black accomplishment. And the whole idea that a Black person has a certain space and place that they should remain in, and that should be dictated to them by white people, the people of Greenwood. They said no to that.
People who worked in service used to come to my father's store and tell him that their employers were stockpiling ammunition. So something was planned long before the outburst. They were looking for something to happen that could start it off.
I was shining shoes and I was making money hand over fist. But we didn't have no toilet facilities there. And of course, the management had arranged for us to use the restrooms on the 4th floor of this building. I wasn't there, so I can't verify this information, but I am told we had a boy, a young man, whose name was Dick Rowland.
Dick Rowland, a shoeshine boy, went up to the upper levels of the Drexel building. He got on the elevator, and sometimes the elevator did not settle correctly, and he stumbled coming into the elevator and brushed up against Sarah Page, who was the elevator operator.
She hollers, and he runs out. Now, immediately, folks come to her rescue. You know, they hear the damsel in distress, and it goes from that to all of a sudden, there's an assault, an attack.
So the next day, the Tribune came out that afternoon and told about what had happened and said, it looks as if we're going to have a lynching.
Dad heard that they were trying to lynch a Black boy down there at the courthouse. So Dad had an old pistol around the house there. He put one in his pocket and he took off. And he just hung around there to see what was going on.
So a bunch of Blacks went down there and asked if they could help protect him. And when they went down, they were armed. And a bunch of whites gathered up.
They gathered. And finally there was 1,500, 2,000 people down there, Black and white.
And one guy said to this Black boy, said, "What are you doing with that gun?" The boy said, "If I have to, I'm going to use it." So a big scuffle broke out and a shot was fired, from what I understand. Then all hell broke loose, as they say.
The first time I ever heard about the race massacre in Tulsa in 1921 was when I was a volunteer on my cousin's mayoral campaign in 2002, and we were at a candidate debate. And somebody at that forum said something about that there had been a riot in Tulsa where bombs were dropped from airplanes onto Tulsans. And I remember hearing that and thinking, that's ridiculous. There's no way that something like that happened here and I haven't heard about it or read about it. My family history goes back to about the 1870s in Tulsa. In fact, my great-great-grandfather, my granddad, and then my cousin, they've been mayors here. I went and asked my grandfathers, neither of whom were alive at the time, but their parents were alive and were here. And they both had stories that had been passed down to them about it. And I couldn't believe it at the time that something like that happened here and that it had largely been covered up. Nobody talked about it openly. And then I go back and look at the history and find that in the late 1990s, there was a state commission that collected oral history, did geophysical scanning, looking for mass graves, and they identified an anomaly in Oak Lawn Cemetery, and then the city would not give them permission to dig. And so I remember just saying, man, if I'm ever mayor, we are going to follow through on this.